And every company has to figure this out. Every company has to find their why. And for us, as I mentioned, the businesses that use our platforms, our services, our apps, they really are the lifeblood of our company. They're the heartbeat of our company. And so when we can also use them in our supply chain, this just extends that impact that we can have.
Welcome to Market Makers, the podcast that explores the driving forces behind innovation and inclusion in today's economy. I'm Troy Duffie, Director of Financial Markets at the Milken Institute. In today's episode, we're diving in deep into the world of supplier diversity, a critical component for fostering growth, equity, and innovation in business. Joining us is Jason Trimiew, the head of supplier diversity at Meta. Jason leads Meta's efforts to ensure that underrepresented businesses have the opportunity to be a part of Meta's supply chain, contributing to both economic empowerment and community development. Be sharing his insights on the strengths, strategies, and challenges of building a diverse supplier base in a tech giant like Meta, and the role that diversity plays in driving global success. We're thrilled to have Jason on the show today. Let's get started.
Hi, my name is Troy Duffie. I'm Director of Financial Markets at the Milken Institute.
And I'm Lenore Beirne, the founder and managing partner at Bright Ventures.
Our podcast is focused on inclusive capitalism. For us, that means focusing on an economy that benefits all stakeholders for the long term. We're so excited to have Jason on from Meta. Jason, it's great for you to join us.
It is great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Today, we're really excited to explore how one innovator, Jason, is making global supply chains more diverse and more inclusive, and really bringing corporations in line with the rich landscape of small and medium-sized business talent. Jason, can you help us just get us a lay of the land? Like, what's your role at Meta? What does that mean in the context of global supply chains and supplier diversity?
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things about working at a company like Meta is people understand the products we make, the apps we build, the services we run. I don't think people understand what it takes to run the company itself. Mm-hmm. And so when we think about the thousands, actually tens of thousands of third parties that Meta pays every year to do everything from provide the produce that goes into our cafes, from building and networking our data centers, professional services firms, we really need these companies to be able to operate and pursue our mission. And so my role is to ensure that we're getting the best talent to compete for those third-party opportunities as suppliers, that we are tapping into the network of entrepreneurs that are out there, and especially focused on entrepreneurs from diverse backgrounds, to make sure that we're really having those companies help us accomplish our mission when we buy those goods and services from them. And this is happening all over the world for us.
Yeah. Take us through why it's so important to have a dedicated space for supplier diversity. Where does that space come from? How long ago did it start?
Yeah, so historically, supplier diversity really began, at least here in the U.S., as something that the government was interested in. Companies were, of course, contracting with the federal government, and we as taxpayers were paying those dollars to those companies. But those companies were not diverse. There were no minority-owned firms. There were very few women-owned firms. And this was a problem, not only because of these systemic blocks to accessing this talent, but because we weren't getting the best results as a country. So laws were passed, offices and federal efforts were created to ensure that we were tapping into these entrepreneurs and the companies they were running to be able to run the federal government. Well, then it became requirements for corporations that were doing business with the federal government to also think about their own supply chains. And so you had a number of things that happened in the federal government that then became part of corporations' supply chain efforts. Of course, these corporations realize, we get value from this. We're actually delivering better results because we've actually gone ahead and diversified our supply chains, whether they did that because they knew that was going to be the result, or they did it because they were required to do it. Yeah. The result was that they were getting better impact. And so that became really an impetus to make this a strategic business case, not just something that was to check a box on a compliance form.
And how does Meta relate to this today? So it sounds like there's been historically a combination of sort of strong suggestions or mandates and choice. where does Meta fall on that spectrum?
Yeah, so we do this simply because it actually produces better results for our company. There's just no question about it. When we are actually having diverse suppliers compete for and win our business, they're getting a chance to demonstrate their talents. We're getting, frankly, more options to choose from, and we're going to get better results because of that. I think for Meta, the other reality is, as a company, we live and die by small and medium businesses that use our products to reach the customers that they care about. And so this gives us a chance to extend that mission and our values of promoting economic opportunity by also looking at not just the apps and services we build that businesses use for marketing purposes or other types of purposes, but also to use our supply chain to extend that value that we can actually provide to communities while also, of course, getting value in return.
Can you talk us through how Meta's executing on this $1 billion strategy? You brought up the $1 billion roundtable you all are a part of. Talk us through that.
Yeah, so let me be very clear. The $1 billion roundtable, we are incredibly grateful to be a part of that community of companies, now over 40 strong, that spend annually at least $1 billion with minority, women, veteran, LGBTQ, and disability-owned companies. But $1 billion against those types of companies and even our own's bottom line is not enough. The real value that we are trying to grow is an inclusive economy, an economy where in every country around the world, you have a strong, solid middle class of businesses. So what do we think about at Meta is we want to meet these requirements, but we want to grow far beyond that. And the other thing we don't want to have is all of this spend concentrated in a few number of suppliers. There are, of course, some very large, diverse suppliers out there. One of the things that we have as a countermeasure to ensure that we are distributing this economic opportunity is that we have a metric that we track against that says our top 10 diverse suppliers should make up no more than 50% of all of our diverse supplier spend. Now, we joined the $1 billion roundtable in 2022, and we've been an active member since, but we really believe that this is not a threshold or a floor that's just there arbitrarily. We really believe we want to drive this value throughout our supply chain, wherever we can find opportunities to increase the value for diverse suppliers to do business with us. That's what we want to do.
So Meta's approach to it, would you say it's a sort of standard approach across other $1 billion roundtable members, or do you think Meta's doing something different?
I would say we're doing something different, but not because we're Meta. I think because we recognize that this is rooted deeply in our culture as a company, and every company has to figure this out. Every company has to find their why. And for us, as I mentioned, the businesses that use our platforms, our services, our apps, they really are the lifeblood of our company. They're the heartbeat of our company. And so when we can also use them in our supply chain, this just extends that impact that we can have. And so I do think there are ways as a technology company, we've tried also to bring that thinking, that kind of hacker mentality to, and I would say, an industry that has stagnated in some respects with respect to supplier diversity's history now over 60 years. And it's not because of people that haven't been focused on things. It's just we need to make sure that diverse suppliers are centered in everything we do and thinking about how they use tech, how they help us build the tech that we use. So we've thought about different things when it comes to how we embed supplier diversity, not just as a program. In fact, we don't talk about it as a program. You rarely hear us say that word because we want this to be part of the DNA of our company. And I think when you approach it in that way, you really are looking at that long-term impact that it can have and not just something that can come and go when you need compliance metrics met or when you have budget for it.
Just definitionally, you operate globally. What does diverse mean in the context of a diverse supplier, in the context of diverse supplier work at Meta?
Yeah, it's a great question. The global definitions of diversity, of course, do vary. And I'll give an example. In the US here, of course, minority refers to the fact that racial and ethnic minorities numerically are in the minority. However, in a country like Brazil, which is someplace we heavily operate, and we're very proud of the work that we're doing in supplier diversity in Brazil, Afro-Brazilians are the majority. But socioeconomically, all the metrics that we would look at in terms of their connection to the economy, they are excluded. It is not inclusive. And so when we think about working in Brazil, we focus and explicitly call out our focus on Black-owned businesses in Brazil, even though, of course, they're the majority of the population. So when we think about different countries and how we want to approach this, we're fundamentally typically looking at where in any economic study that any government would do of their own citizenry, their own business landscape, those that are on the fringes, those that don't lack for the the grit, the hustle, the innovation, the talent, but they lack the connection. And that's ultimately what supplier diversity is at its best, is when we're establishing, nurturing, sustaining, and accelerating those connections to large global supply chains.
How do you feel like you're doing tracking against that $1 billion mark, or even surging past it on an annual basis? And then can you give us a sense of how much that is compared to the large spend around supplier diversity, or just diversity, or supply chain in general, across Meta?
Yeah, I will always say we need to do more. And that's not just because it's a soundbite, it's really true. We struggle at a company of Meta size and scale with the fact that we also are completely decentralized when it comes to the way we buy goods and services. We empower our employees to engage the suppliers they need to get the job done that they have. That is a great opportunity for diverse suppliers because it creates a lot more entry points to the company. The challenge for a small centralized team like ours is how do we get in front of that? And that's, again, where we've tried to leverage technology and embed this into the DNA, the way people find diverse suppliers within our company. But this is where we probably struggle the most, is we find out about opportunities after the fact, or we hear things that, we wish we could have gotten in front of. And so we're always trying to figure out how to embed ourselves earlier in the procurement process. This is not new to us, but there are companies that are much more established in their procurement. And that trade-off is they have more access early on. The challenge is then how do they find those suppliers for those opportunities? So it's a challenge on either side. So that's where we want to go. I think in terms of the relative size and scale of our work relative to others, I mean, the $1 billion roundtable is currently roughly 42 members, each with annual commitments of spending at least $1 billion. So, there's tens of $1 billion right there that are going to diverse suppliers. Now, we could all go on to the 10Ks and go on to the different websites and look and see that this is still a relatively small percentage. And our goal is to move away from a dollar value towards a percentage of our total spend, is the way we're goaling internally. Because of how we're growing, this actually does create, as we grow, it will create more opportunity. But as we've gone through some challenges in the last couple of years as a business, that can also adjust as well. So we again, our goal is not, while we have very clear targets, our goal is always to embed this in the fundamental DNA of the way Meta goes about buying goods and services from third parties. The challenge right now in the industry is that, and it's very frustrating, is that we're having to defend the same case again.
Yeah.
We can't talk about this work without talking about disparity. And most supplier diversity programs actually have, and particularly those that are at a public level, meaning local government, federal government, they're often preceded before they launch with these disparity studies.
Yeah.
That disparity has not gone away. I say this all the time. I think the most destabilizing force in our society is the racial wealth gap. I don't think it's polarization. I don't think those things are bad. But when you do not have assets that you are able to transfer to your family or able to leverage to create more assets, you really are stuck. Yeah. And there are important assets, of course, different asset classes, but having a business that you can leverage, that you own, and that is an important part of supplier diversity, is that the business is actually owned, majority owned by the diverse individual or group of individuals. You actually have a chance to leverage that into something more powerful and leave a legacy. And I think if we don't, as a society, we intuitively understand when we go about our daily lives, shopping, the hairdresser, the grocery store, like we understand the value of these firms. We don't think about who owns them and what do those people do with those assets that we are investing. And we maybe are investing on our values. We may be going to certain companies over other companies because of they align with whatever our value system may be. It's really incongruous that we kind of don't think about the fact that this is a fundamental way to grow the economy. And it's actually a strategy to grow the economy. And instead we're stuck back in this world of, well, people are being given preference.
On the other side of it, though, I feel like I grew up in a community. I didn't know you could be a diverse supplier for Meta or for the government or for a large corporation, right? And so for those who are growing businesses and who want to get into the supply chain of Meta, how would they do that?
Yeah, this is really an important point. There is a network of third-party organizations, most of them either 501c3 public charities, but these organizations, advocacy organizations, we would call them, who are really there to help business owners navigate this and understand this better. Unfortunately, a lot of those organizations are not well capitalized. They're not, I would say, as strategic as they could be in terms of their own business models. So they look at events and sponsorships as kind of the way that they sustain their operations, which is not really tied to their core business, which is serving entrepreneurs. And I think our misalignment there has really not helped entrepreneurs understand that this is a path for them. And let's just also be clear, marketing, and I'm not a marketer, but I happen to work at a company that's pretty good at these kinds of things.
I'd say so.
We haven't done a good enough job of making this case. And we've couched it so tightly to concepts like supplier diversity, which can easily be attacked, rather than business growth, new markets, new types of customers. And then as a result, we have people that really now feel that they only can fit into this box of supplier diversity. It's like, no, this is just a tool, a lever for you to access a new customer segment that needs to fit your business, needs to buy the goods and services that you're selling. But those organizations that are there to enable that process, they really need that investment so that they can do their job more effectively. They need to be a little more strategic in terms of how they talk about those opportunities to excite business owners, especially this next wave of entrepreneurs that have no idea that this world exists.
Yeah, I actually think your approach is radical in the sense that you're saying that Meta knows that they rely on this group of connected people and communities to thrive as a business. And therefore, like, how do we actually get in deeper and more sustainable relationship with this group, right?
Yeah.
And part of that is having goods and services flow both ways.
That's right.
And so I think that's a really interesting sort of economic argument for sort of collective growth and collaboration that I haven't heard as a standard for how other organizations are thinking about engaging with the communities around them. So I really appreciate that reframing. And my suspicion is that organizations of all kinds could benefit from asking themselves that question. Like, what would it take for my core customer group to stay active, healthy, and engaged with my business over time? And almost certainly it's engaging them in other ways.
Yeah, I think that you, maybe not you, the general you, I've talked about the organization or that concept of supply diversity being an old concept, right? It's a 50, 60, 70-year-old concept. We haven't seen a lot of progress in the area, right? And so if you could reimagine this space, what does that look like for you? How would you make it better?
Great question. First of all, I would leverage technology. I do see the power of technology to level the playing field. I say this as starting my career in microfinance in East Africa, working in Kenya in the 90s, not having a cell phone, and actually getting my first cell phone in Kenya and seeing what just cell phone technology, leapfrogging over landline technology, opened up as possibilities for entrepreneurs looking to get market prices. And instead of having to deal with the middleman, they were now able to actually understand what their product was selling for in the city, and that improved their bargaining power. So I do think this notion of technology, and I'm using that term just very broadly, diverse suppliers are out there. This is not even a question. All the studies, all the census show that the fastest growing segments of entrepreneurship are in diverse communities. I mean, the most likely person to start a business in America tomorrow is a Latina. And if we are not understanding how to support that entrepreneur in her journey, we are not going to be able to reap. I mean, even if our own self-interest was all we cared about, we're not going to be able to reap the benefit of that. So I think it really is important for us to know that even if that Latina doesn't know that supplier diversity exists, we have technology to be able to find her. And if she's selling something that we need to buy because it will help us actually run our company better, we can use technology to do that. And I think it's very basic and it sounds very trite, but it's actually the thing that has, in my view, really hindered the growth and development of supplier diversity, because there's been a very slow adoption of technology, a very slow adoption of the tools that are out there that we use every day in our lives. But for whatever reason, when we start talking about supplier diversity, we want to go back to databases. Who uses data? I mean, who lives in a database anymore? Do any of us manage our lives through databases? No. We have search engines, very powerful ones. We have social media. that connect us to brands and show us brands that we would have never considered before. But we have not really applied that in supplier diversity in the way that we should.
Kind of the human algorithm, right, around supplier diversity has been one that needs to be updated. So it's great to hear, how you're reimagining this space.
Yeah, I love that, the human algorithm.
Yeah.
And Jason, I happen to know that you're involved in shaping not just the global supply chain at Meta, but the broader tech landscape. Can you speak to us a little bit more about the work that you're doing to shape how other tech organizations engage with diverse suppliers?
Yeah, so one of the benefits about being in, I think, the technology sector, although this is true elsewhere, is there's a lot of collaboration. And so I'm part of an organization called TechScale, which stands for Supply Chain Access, Leadership, and Equity. And the goal there is to work as a industry, technology companies, new ones, old ones, and really try to work collaboratively to ensure that we are not just advancing our own individual corporate efforts, but that we're trying to push the whole industry forward. Some of the ways we're thinking about doing that is around things like payment terms. One of the issues that challenges any small business, but particularly diverse-owned companies, is the fact that companies don't pay them on time or quickly. And so we've been trying to push a message that says, let's talk about, instead of net 30, net 90, let's talk about net now. Let's talk about this notion that we are sitting on large balance sheets that can accommodate paying suppliers when they've done the work, what they need to be paid so that they can pay their employees, they can invest in their communities. And so when we do this as Meta, as a single company, that's a challenge. When we get other companies in the TechScale community to align with us, we have a louder voice. And so that's why we are such an active part of that TechScale community.
I'm curious, as we begin to close out, if you can talk us through what suppliers you use at Meta as a tech platform. I think, what could you possibly need? And so what does purchasing and procurement look like at Meta?
Yeah, so I'll talk about one that's actually in the tech space, just so we can kind of show that we buy across a lot of different dimensions and categories. But for example, we have an incredible supplier that is supporting some of our groundbreaking AI work. And the generative AI commitments that we've made are actually being enabled by a Black woman-owned business who also operates at a global scale with most of the workers in West Africa who are working on helping our AI be the best that it can be. But of course, we also have very mundane things as well. Food culture is a very big thing at our company. Sometimes I'm embarrassed to admit that. We are very fortunate to be able to have meals that we get to enjoy as employees there. That creates a ton of opportunity. The carrots and kale and all these things that come into our campus, we're looking for distributors. And we've had an incredible partnership with a woman-owned produce distributor that in that industry is very unheard of. And they've been an incredible partner. The last thing I'll mention, just as we give one more example, is, of course, when we think about our public presence, meaning when we show up in communities. Obviously, everyone has us maybe in their phone or their pocket in the app, but we actually show up in communities. We activate various events. We're working with a lot of creators. And I think this is another way in which we have diverse suppliers that have a real read on the culture, a real read on what's current, what's trending, and what, more importantly, is coming down the line. Yeah. We want to partner with them because that's going to make our business better, but it's also going to be authentic. We're not going to be coming into a community and not representing that community, not building with that community. And I think those are some of the ways diverse suppliers really stand out in our ecosystem.
Got it.
Is there anywhere else, Jason, that you're building an inclusive economy that you'd like us to know about?
One of the things that I'm fundamentally committed to, and it's a very simple thing, is putting good people together and seeing what comes of that. And so whenever we gather, whether it's for a conference or for just travel for work, we always try to get our diverse supplier community together. Oftentimes in a large company, diverse supplier relationship, the supplier is looking at the company as the customer, which we are. But oftentimes what we're trying to encourage them to say is, let's look at each other as well. This creative agency could also use this motion graphics design firm who could also use this caterer for an event that they're doing. And we're trying to put all those people into a room. We're pretty good at connection at our company. And so we actually use our products in this way as well, using our products to knit that community closer together, that fabric tightening up so that we can all build together and raise that inclusive economy together.
Fantastic. Is there any way we can connect with you online or offline?
Yeah, well, I would be remiss if I did not say you can meet us on Facebook and Instagram.
That would be not great.
at Meta Global Supplier Diversity. We actually use our products because we want to be very transparent with the community about what we're doing and how they can connect to those opportunities. And of course, we use other social platforms as well. People can connect with me. We get a lot of requests, as you might imagine, to understand more about what we buy and where those businesses might fit in. And we answer a lot of those questions. You can actually message us directly through our Facebook page or through our Instagram account, and our team will get back to you on those opportunities.
Thanks, Jason, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. This has been great.
Yeah.
That wraps up this episode of the Market Makers podcast. A huge thank you to Jason Trimiew for sharing his expertise on supplier diversity and how Meta is leading the way in making inclusivity a core part of their business strategy. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with others who are passionate about creating a more inclusive, innovative marketplace. You can follow us at ImpactAlpha and wherever else you stream to stay updated on upcoming episodes. Thanks for tuning into Market Makers. Until next time, I'm Lenore Champagne-Beirne, and remember, diversity is not just good for business, it is the future of business.